Closed, but its emergency services will be downgraded.
What I am doing today is essentially resolving one of the biggest problems we have in the NHS, and I hope I'm doing it in a way that will lead to better care and better treatment.
I'm live at Lewisham Hospital, where campaigners have one very simple message. They are angry and they are vowing to fight on.
We look at the implications for hospital trusts across the capital, also tonight. The fatal stabbing of a teenager in Pimlico. Police appeal to the families of the killers to give them up. Plus, the house, which is now worthless, how the proposed HS2 rail link is having a devastating impact on some homeowners. And
I wanna live like common people. I wanna do whatever common people do.
why Pulp's frontman chose to take on a Londoner for his first production effort.
Common people.
Hello and good evening. It's the hospital whose future is being seen as a model for how the NHS copes with financial crises. And today, days after more than 10,000 people marched to save it, the government stepped back from closing Lewisham's accident and emergency service. Instead, the department will be downgraded, losing a quarter of its patients. The cut is part of a plan to deal with a debt of £150 million at the neighbouring South London NHS Trust. We'll be crossing over to Lewisham in a moment, where campaignners unhappy with the compromise are threatening legal action. But first, here's our political correspondent, Carl Mercer.
Even up to the last day, they were singing and they were showing off their petitions to keep their A&E and maternity units. All ages, all races, one cause. This was the end of a long-running campaign. Today, the Health Secretary made his call on the row that's divided medical opinion.
What I've decided is not to close the A&E at Lewisham, which was, I think, the biggest thing that people were concerned about. But for the more complex cases, if someone has meningitis, pneumonia, a broken hip, that they should be treated at a neighbouring hospital where they can get specialist help that will be of a better standard than they can currently get. And the advice I've got is that that will save around 100 lives a year, which I think is very important.
Would it be fair to call it A&E light?
No, it is an A&E.
Protesters and local doctors wanted to keep the A&E and maternity units at Lewisham as they are now. The man sent in to sort out the financial problems in South London said the A&E should close and maternity should be downgraded. What we have now is something of a compromise. Still an A&E, but smaller and not doing as much as before, seeing about 75% of its current patients. It'll keep 24/7 emergency consultant cover, but won't see the most seriously ill patients. The maternity unit will become midwife and not consultant-led, meaning it will deal with the more straightforward births. Complicated cases will go elsewhere. The unit will see about 10% of its current patients. MPs who've campaigned against any downgrading remain unconvinced at the plans announced today.
At the moment, I'm far from convinced that this is what it says on the tin. He's talking about a smaller A&E, but it's really not clear as to exactly what that means in practice.
I personally am very worried about where babies will be born in Lewisham and the loss of the A&E, the full A&E services in Lewisham, and I'm not very happy about it, and clearly I don't support the closure.
Some, though, think the government should have gone further and shut the A&E at Lewisham.
We're a little bit disappointed that he didn't go all the way and close the A&E, because we really believe that you need to go to a proper trauma centre if you're really ill, and if you're not, then an urgent care centre is adequate.
These are plans that spread further than just Lewisham, though. They'll see changes across South London. The Princess Royal in Bromley will be taken over by King's College Hospital. The Queen Mary's Sidcup site will be taken over by the Oxleys NHS Trust. Spare buildings on the site will be sold off. The government says the plans will save 100 lives a year. But already there's the threat of a legal challenge.
We are talking to lawyers about this. We've been concerned from the beginning that the legal powers that were being used only related to the trust, which was a failing trust. And Lewisham isn't a failing trust.
Changing hospital services is never easy. The government has compromised by not closing the A&E at Lewisham. It may not, though, be enough for many local protesters. Carl Mercer, BBC London News.
Well, as we saw a little earlier, campaigners have gathered outside Lewisham Hospital tonight in protest over the government's plan. And we can join Alex Bushell, who's there for us tonight. Alex.
Well, Riz, this is what it means to the people of Lewisham. If we swing the camera around, you can see that there are around 300 to 400 protesters here tonight. They're gathering to have their voice heard. And if you look behind them, you may just be able to make out the hospital itself. Now, if the Secretary of State thought that this lot would thank him for not closing the A&E unit down altogether, well, he was very wrong. They are dismayed, they are disappointed, but above all, tonight, they're angry.
This is how a victory can feel like a failure. The A&E department will be downgraded, treating 3/4 of the patients it currently handles. But the government is clear, the emergency services will not go. Few here believe them.
There may be 24-hour emergency consultant cover here. I'm not quite sure who those consultants will be. We won't have the 12 to 15,000 admissions under acute medicine we have. We won't have the intensive care unit. Presumably paediatrics will slowly slip into some form of decline. What sort of cover will we have? I don't know. We'll have cover for very low intensity patients, similar to cottage hospitals of many years ago.
This maternity unit is to be scaled back as well. More straightforward births remain. Complicated ones will go elsewhere. For local mums watching today's announcement during their coffee morning, a sense of betrayal.
The people of Lewisham are not stupid. They are not going to be fobbed off. And this is still a downgrade of a hospital because of financial failings in a different healthcare trust. This is outrageous that a successful clinical hospital is being downgraded for these reasons.
Actually, what people will really want to do is go to the best A&E. They're not going to want to go to an A&E that isn't going to provide a full service.
They're not alone. Around 20,000 marched in support of their cause last weekend. They remember that just last April, the BBC programme Sing While You Work was here to open a £12 million upgrade to an A&E unit that today will now have a downgrade. Above all, though, there is a feeling of injustice that Lewisham is paying for other people's mistakes.
It's not because of our failure. We're a solvent trust. We've been hitting surpluses for the last 5 years. It's because of difficulties elsewhere in our neighbours. And that's a disturbing precedent, I think, for the NHS.
As for Lewisham's corner of the NHS, well, yes, today's shake-up could have been worse. Still, no one's celebrating here. Far from it. They say their fight with the government has only just begun.
Well, that fight will now take the form of legal action. The Mayor of Lewisham and campaign leaders here tonight have said they will be seeking a judicial review to overturn the decision today by the Secretary of State to downgrade this A&E unit. They also know it will take around 3 years to implement all these changes. 3 years, they say they will continue to fight and frustrate the government's plans. Riz.
Alex, thank you. Well, joining me here is our political correspondent, Carl Mercer. As we heard there, as far as the campaigners are concerned, this isn't the end of the matter.
Yeah, I think in many ways it's the start of the next stage of the protest. We've had something like a 3-month campaign already. But make no mistake here, is the government have compromised today on what was the initial plan from the man they sent in to try and sort it out. He said that the Lewisham A&E should shut down. The government took extra senior medical advice. They've obviously listened to what local people have said as well, and they have moved their position. They've come up with what they say is a safe and an affordable plan for the whole of South London, not just Lewisham. And that's their key point. They're saying, look, this isn't just about the care at Lewisham, this is about delivering care to 1 million people who live across South London. But as Alex was saying, I'm not sure that's going to be enough to convince those campaigners who are out there protesting tonight, or indeed the Mayor of Lewisham, who told us earlier that they are now consulting lawyers. I suspect this may well end up in the courts.
And there are concerns, aren't there, that this could have wider implications for NHS trusts across the capital, not just South London? Yeah,
I think you're right. You know, we already know there are plans to shut 4 A&Es in North West London. All of those hospitals and campaigners will be looking very closely at what's happened today. There are similar issues down in South West London, Epsom and St Helier, maybe plans to close their A&Es. Again, campaigners, staff, they will be looking at what's happened here and say, well, look, if we make enough noise, will we be able to protect our units? If we threaten legal action, will we be able to protect them? And the Secretary of State knows he's got to deal with a lot more issues still in London.
OK, Carl, thank you. Our political correspondent, Carl Mercer.